Welcome back to the news, everybody. So, CD Projekt Red have basically had to delay everything. And there's a lot to get into here as we go through their new big company update, what their plans are for Cyberpunk and Witcher. So, let's just go straight into it, right? So, for some of the core points, Red 2.0 is in progress, building agile teams and internal competencies. Basically, that Red 2.0 is their name for their kind of new parallel development pipeline and all of the things that they're basically doing to, well, they kind of need to do a 2.0 because look at how 1.0 kind of finished.
Clearly something went wrong.
Yeah. In spite of having great games, often. So basically, they want 2 independent teams working on 2 AAA projects, strengthening the role of the CTO, followed by changes to the management board. Of course, that would be the chief technical officer, and obviously, we know the technical issues have been an issue with, their latest Red Engine project.
Yep.
Cyberpunk, and of course, they've swapped engines now.
Yeah, and Red Engine stuff is even labeled as a write-off in their accounts later on, which is interesting.
Yeah, and also refocusing on staff well-being and a priority given to HR activities. So, what does this stuff basically mean? We're going to fix up our technology, renew our company culture, do things better. That all sounds good. So, what does this actually mean for some of the games? Well, first of all, the expansion to Cyberpunk 2077 has been delayed. Yep. So it was expected to come out this year. It has been now announced for 2023.
Yeah, which will mark it's been over 2 years. It'll be well over 2 years since the game launched at that point. It might be 3 if it's later in the year. But they were sly and like never announcing a date. But it's definitely like, this has taken a lot longer than anyone expected.
Yeah. Now, that said, when it does arrive, it should be pretty damn good because, this is not a small expansion. They say it is a whole new storyline. Yeah. They initially did say no less DLC than Witcher 3, and that would mean, 2 story expansions.
Yeah.
Witcher 3 expansions, they are, top shelf. Brilliant.
Yeah, I did see some people say that, this is literally completely speculation, but the way they're talking about whole new storyline, I think people were expecting it to be, smaller stories. So the fact that they're now saying the one expansion's 2023, I think some people are reading that as they've combined whatever DLC plans are working on to make a bigger update as opposed to smaller things, but that's pure speculation. Yeah. But again, it would make sense if you go, well, Cyberpunk is a bad rep. What if we hang on and make the return to form even bigger, even better? Then obviously that's exactly what they need.
And it might seem a bit weird if you think about how the game industry traditionally works, right? Where it's like, oh, Mass Effect Andromeda had a funky launch. Let's minorly fix it, cancel all DLC, done, throw it in the bin, gone. Yeah. Whereas the long tail sales is such an essential part of how this company runs business. And we will see that when we talk about some of their sales figures. So as much as it may seem insane that the game will go 2 years without an expansion or any major content, that is something that can work for this company and where they're positioned. Now, the funny thing, though, is not only do we have this being delayed, of course, the multiplayer was cancelled, and we actually have Red Engine multiplayer tech being included in their accounts as a write-off.
Yep. So I think at least for now, that's likely dead in the water. I can't imagine, considering the amount of technical debt they have to get through just to make the game run well, and then obviously the amount of technical debt to get an expansion out, I assume they're just like, was anyone going to play this? Sure, but whatever.
Yeah, and it feels like they just got a bit too greedy beforehand. It's not just, hey, we're going to put Cyberpunk out. They obviously weren't ready. They were announcing the multiplayer and everything, which I think had a lot of people just being confused and thinking, what is this? Is this for the market, not us? A bit weird.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that's cancelled. Now, they have sold 18 million copies.
Yep. But
they'll be grand.
Yeah. But that is actually a much worse number than you think, honestly, when you get into it.
Now, that is the surprising element. So,
yep.
As many have pointed out, and Tweaktown have put into very good graphic form for us, this is apparently devastating. I remember the Tomb Raider game not getting 6 million sales and Square Enix being,
furious,
deeply furious and sad about it. So they had 14 million launch sales. That's extremely good. 4 million sales over the next year apparently is awful, though. Obviously, we've got no idea how many refunds happened. And a lot of this information is from distributors, so, the likes of, say, some things like Best Buy were found selling discs of this game for $5 to get rid of their stock.
Yep, exactly.
Now, the problem is that its initial expectations were 30 million in the first year.
Yep. So obviously 18 million is an incredible number of sales. It's an insane amount of money. But when you're going, we can do 30, 18's almost half of that. And that is genuinely, like, that is abysmal for what you'd really expect. Is like, considering The Witcher's long tail and how long tail of like these massive, massive, super great games sell, all of the analysts are looking at this and going, oh yeah, it's really apparent what happened. This game released based on pre-orders and like initial hype, sold millions, 14 million, and then everyone just said to their mate, here, don't buy Cyberpunk, it's a piece of shit. And then it just cut a massive amount of like what they saw as possible sales completely off.
Yeah, and one thing I've brought up here is just a stock chart to sort of show some of this. You had this stock, it was going up, 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 hitting a high in 23rd of August 2020 of 446. I think that's in zloty.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, I think that's at a time where what these investors were, what the market, what this price was taking account for would be the future expected sales, perhaps that 30 million year one. And what we can see is that it then falls into a bit more of a sort of stable price around like the 170 mark afterwards. So you can really see that it is returning to like a bit more of its like 2018 levels, kind of away from the craziness that was there. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to go through.
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing where it's almost the same as like, I think this is one of the first times I think investors and gamers were on like the same side of the table going, you promised us a lot more than this. What happened? Where's our money? And that's almost like the first time we've been in alignment.
Yeah, and I think that like that the stock was that high, that the sales expectations were that high. Yeah. I think that just shows so much confusion. They must have thought they would be able to pull off some extreme BioWare magic. Yep. And they did not. Now, for The Witcher, we can maybe understand why they would have thought 30 million year one. So The Witcher franchise now has 65 million combined sales. 40 million of those are Witcher 3. So, this really is just an incredible kind of rock for their business to stand upon. That's just awesome. Now, to look at their future plans then, and some of their production stuff, to just give you a TLDR. Yeah. So for new games, we've got the new Witcher game, which is being built on Unreal Engine 5. This is good news for avoiding those red engine problems. Yep. I would say especially, this is a company that loves to push the boat in terms of graphics. And I remember what people could even push Witcher 2.
And Witcher 2 wasn't even them like with the successful money. That was them going, we'll scrape together a game kind of money. Because obviously Witcher 3 is where they kind of exploded, but before that they were a small enough team. Like,
now, like Witcher 2, between it and Enhanced Edition, like those really did. Kind of, it's just amazing comparing Witcher 2 and 1. It's very hilarious. Especially that sort of twisty, weird sword animation Geralt does. But right, new Witcher on Unreal Engine 5. I think we could assume then that the new Cyberpunk will also be UE5.
New Cyberpunk. Are they making new Cyberpunk?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
that's the entire pillar of their business is parallel development to 2 AAA teams.
Yeah.
So that will probably be UE5 as well. That will then allow them to share the knowledge. There's going to be a Gwent spin-off. You know what, Gwent? I know it hasn't caught on massively, but I want to check out what Thronebreaker is like because it seems to have some interesting RPG elements to it. Then also the Molasses Flood project based on one of their IP.
Yep.
What's that? I have no idea.
Don't really know anything about it itself, just they have the Molasses Flood studio, which is them under a different name, and they're working on an unannounced project, which is just going to be, it's hard to know what it is, but if you look at their development team, it's a small part of their overall business, but they definitely do have it could be like a little bit more Gwenty or a little bit more Thronebreakery, but based on one of their franchises, they're definitely going, might as well just try something else.
Oh, interesting. Then, of course, for the updates, we've got Cyberpunk expansion, Witcher 3 Next Gen, which has been technically delayed indefinitely, but it will come out, Gwent, and then Monster Player. Now, for the Witcher 3 thing, the reason I say indefinitely is because they just can't put a date on it right now. Yeah. The reasoning there is, I think, speculated, but quite likely, because Saber Interactive's developers in Russia were working on it. Yeah. And then, of course, they've delayed it because they have, cut ties with Russia, as quite a few companies who have, exposure to Russia have done. That means they have to take the project in-house and do the project in-house, which is, of course, going to mean that right now they can't really give us time frames
Yeah.
because they're still doing that.
Yeah, it is literally like, oh, we have a new project to do. We have to figure out the project before we can give you a date. Sorry about that, but
Yeah.
it'll happen soon. But it was definitely like I think it was Winsky came out and was like, yeah, no, people are in the financial call for this was like, people are saying delayed indefinitely. That's what all the headlines are saying. That doesn't really accurately address the situation. It's like, it's technically true, but it's not really the spirit of it, if you follow.
Yeah, it's not like where StarCraft Ghost for the longest time was delayed indefinitely,
Yeah.
not cancelled.
Yeah.
And then for the far future, they do say they have unannounced projects being researched. And if we look at their development teams engaged in ongoing projects, things like this are just really cool.
Great.
So, as time goes on, we see other projects, including the new Witcher game, just having that nice little increase. We see Molasses Flood. Coming in. We have Cyberpunk 2077 support and next gen version. Massive company focus, diminishing over time as that game stabilizes.
Yep.
Then with this like blue bit, interestingly, just sort of staying at that size. So I feel like they probably just have the team they need for that. If they now no longer need to do like humongous core technical things, and they basically just need a content team to ship it.
Yeah, almost certainly. The one thing to note, I think, is you can see a lot of like the proportionate sizes falling, but that like dark blue of other projects, that like the same bar might be referring to substantially more developers if they've been hiring up for UE5 projects. So it's not to say like, oh, there's a lot less working on this Cyberpunk expansion now. That might be true, but also might just be they've got a whole lot of other devs.
Yeah, and a bit of that too is like, okay, it's time to exit damage control mode and actually have a good long-term future for the company. Because if you just sprint from disaster to disaster to disaster, then you're not plotting a course anywhere. Mm-hmm. So overall, that is the situation. Mm-hmm. Delays, but I think this is a case where delays are good.
Yeah,
it is a case where, you could almost say that delaying at the last moment is something that they continually kind of ended up doing. And that probably damaged them a lot, because if you think about this from a project management perspective, it's like, okay, we're now 3 weeks before the deadline and another delay. That wrecks how you actually manage your project and allocate time.
Yeah, you have to replan. So,
Yeah.
So the whole point is, instead of delaying by 3 months, 6 months time, delay by 3 months now, and then you can actually plan your project properly. And it's like, I think that the whole delay and everything thing feels like it's a very different flavor to Ubisoft. Because whenever Ubisoft delayed everything, everyone just pointing, laughing, going, haha, your games are shit. But in this case, it's like, I feel like because they've actually owned up to stuff and going, oh, here, we're definitely going to fix this. It's not the case where like Ubisoft, like, we've delayed everything because we're being laughed at, but we were right all along. The gamers were wrong. And then them doing weird shit like cancelling all the Breakpoint future content and stuff like that. So it's like very different flavors of, this is bad news for people who want games now, but good news for people who want their games to actually be better and good in the long term.
And to be honest, what I'm very interested in is, it's Nanite and Lumen in UE5. I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff.
Gorgeous stuff.
Of the Matrix tech demo.
Oh, yeah.
That has, because now that's something that actually you can do in PC. And holy shit. Wow. Like, I already, I put it on the Xbox Series X. And it was pretty mind-blowing for what it is.
Like better than the movie, like.
Looks like a big-budget student film.
Yeah.
Very confusing filmmaking experience. I found it fun because I kind of enjoyed what they were grappling with, but I don't know. Maybe need to get some of those fight choreography people from the old ones back. But anyway, if you just look at what UE5 can actually put out in terms of graphics, and I'm then thinking like, all right, that like Cyberpunk, I think now, generally speaking, in the past, in limited and specific scenarios, looks fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Incredible. So to think that we could get that with maybe more stability, better performance, it could be incredible. And I guess as well to see that technology being used for a game that is made ground up, perhaps with some of that technology in mind in the fantasy setting, to me is a very impressive thing. Now, I guess it is worth kind of saying, the main demos that we've seen of like Nanite and Lumen and all of that, one of them has been Rocky Terrain. Rocky Terrain is a bit of like a wet dream for those technologies. Yeah. Because that's the sort of thing that for how Nanite works, like fucking maps onto that brilliantly. The way that lighting will work in a scene like that is also like quite good.
Yeah.
It's not like a hyper complex scene. not a great example, but it's a bit like how, Terminator 2 has the liquid metal Terminator because that's what you can do good at that point in time.
Oh, yeah.
New Battlestar Galactica in 2003 has its, smooth, shiny, modern Cylons because that's what could actually feasibly look good with the CGI of the day. So, between that and the Matrix thing, we're definitely seeing examples where that's where the tech would naturally look the best. There's actually a perfect example of this from my hometown. Do you remember that PS5
bike game?
Racing game? Yeah. Now, one of the things that made its tech demo basically look like real life, and I mean, those are roads I drive down, so it's very strange seeing them in a video game, because I'd go to as a kid to that, to the Northwest 200, which is the track they're doing there. But it's an overcast day. It's raining. It has multiple things that are working in favor of what typically works quite well.
Yeah, you got.
And the game does not look as good. I mean, it looks great, but it doesn't look as great in, other scenarios with different lighting.
Yeah, you gotta get the shiny road on the go, like.
Yeah. So we are in that situation where, like, Nanite and Lumen, I want to see them applied in lots of different scenarios, but the prospect of these new projects being made with those technologies from the ground up, it just makes me think maybe the new Witcher game they do can be just as, boundary pushing and mind blowing to people as, Witcher 3 was when it came out. Yeah. And that's really exciting.
That's why I think it's interesting to go back to the very first thing we showed, which is the year of pivotal internal changes, and them saying we're strengthening the role of our CTO. And that's like, Chief Technology Officer. We're going to make that a real core pillar of our business, real focus of what we're doing. And that's like, they're not just making these games in UE5. Obviously they are, but like they have a strategic partnership with Epic, which is kind of going a little bit beyond, and that to me speaks like they're not interested in going, oh yes, we will happily be consumers and use Unreal Engine 5 in whatever boxed form you give us. It's very much, no, we want to be on the ground. We want to help make like the prettiest, the best UE5 games there are, almost in the same way that Square Enix often do, where a lot of like Square Enix and Nvidia work together really, really well with Luminous Productions to really push the boat out for stuff like FF15 in its earliest days was like, we are literally making the prettiest stuff on the planet. Obviously, they weren't great at making games, but obviously, as CDPR showed, they can kind of do both if they put enough focus onto it. So that's I think that's the very like next level stuff is possible to come out of these guys.
Yeah, like look, I want games like the ones that they make, so I hope this all turns out really good for them. Just don't mislead reviewers again.
Yeah,
that was rough stuff. So, right, good luck to them. I think big hype for the sorts of things we could maybe get in a few years. Hopefully there won't be another GPU crisis around that time. And with that said, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.